My name is Kenya Matthews, and I'm 32 years old, working as a criminal defense attorney. 3 days ago, my identical twin sister walked into my law office, her body marked with bruises so intense that for a moment I barely recognized her. When she finally whispered that her husband was responsible, I made a choice that would permanently alter both of our lives. I switched places with her, and I made absolutely certain he would never forget what followed. But before you judge what I did, ask yourself this: how far would you go to protect the one person who shares your soul? You see, when your twin, someone who looks exactly like you, shows up bleeding and emotionally shattered, begging you not to contact the authorities because fear has completely consumed her, something deep inside you fractures. I've spent the last 10 years helping put criminals behind bars, studying their patterns, their excuses, their lies. I never imagined I'd have to cross that line myself to save my own sister. Yet here we are, and honestly, I would make the same decision again without hesitation. If this story connects with you in any way, tap the like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss stories like this, and comment below which city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this message truly reaches. Now let me explain exactly how I taught that man a lesson he would never forget. You need to understand something important about me and my sister. We're not just twins. We're identical. Same face, same voice, same posture, even the same subtle expressions. Growing up, even our own parents struggled to tell us apart at times. We swapped places at school, confused our teachers, and pulled harmless pranks on friends. Back then, it was innocent, playful, and full of laughter. We were inseparable, two halves of the same soul. That's what our mother always said. But life has a way of slowly pulling people in different directions, doesn't it? After college, I went on to law school. Kesha chose a different path and became an elementary school teacher. I moved to the city, working brutal 80-hour weeks at a law firm, grinding non-stop as I moved to the city, working brutal 80-hour weeks at a law firm, grinding non-stop as I climbed toward partnership. She stayed in our hometown, teaching second graders how to read and write. I was chasing achievement and status. She was chasing something quieter: peace, stability, maybe a normal family life. And that's when she met Marcus Johnson. God, I should have noticed the signs. I should have stayed closer, watched more carefully. But I was consumed by my career, buried in depositions, courtroom battles, and building a reputation with my name on it. I missed the red flags. I missed all of it. At first glance, Marcus appeared flawless. A pharmaceutical sales representative. Stable job. Comfortable income. Smooth, confident, and incredibly charming. The type of man who opens doors, pulls out chairs, and always knows exactly what to say. At their wedding, he delivered a speech about how Keisha was the greatest thing that had ever happened to him, promising he'd spend his entire life making her happy. I remember watching my sister in her white dress, glowing with optimism, and thinking, she deserves this. She deserves to be loved this way. I couldn't have been more wrong. After the wedding, the distance between us slowly expanded. At first, I told myself it was normal. She had a husband now, then a baby, my niece, Aaliyah. Meanwhile, my caseload was exploding, clients pulling me in every direction. We went from talking daily to weekly check-ins, then monthly calls, and eventually just holidays and birthdays. And every time I saw her, something felt different. She looked smaller somehow, quieter, as if someone was slowly lowering her volume, dimming the light she used to carry so effortlessly. I convinced myself I was overthinking it. I told myself, marriage changes people, motherhood changes people. I fed myself lie after lie because the truth was far too terrifying to confront. My twin sister, my other half, was being broken down right in front of me, and I didn't truly see it until 3 days ago. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember that clearly, because Tuesdays are my lighter days, mostly paperwork, no court appearances. I was sitting in my office, flipping through case files, sipping lukewarm coffee, when my secretary buzzed in. Her voice wasn't normal. It carried a sharp edge, a tone of concern that immediately made my stomach drop. "Miss Matthews, your sister is here." "But Kenya, she doesn't look well." My heart sank before I ever laid eyes on her. I told my secretary to send her in immediately and to put every call on hold. Nothing else mattered. The door opened and I looked up. And I swear, for a brief moment, I didn't recognize the woman standing there. She wore dark sunglasses indoors, in my office, with no sunlight anywhere near us. Long sleeves, even though it was 85 degrees outside. A turtleneck in the middle of summer. And she was limping, favoring her left side, moving like every single step sent pain straight through her body. It was Keisha. I stood up slowly, my attorney instincts kicking in automatically, already noting details, already assembling facts, building a case before I even understood what the case was. "What's wrong? What happened?" I asked. She didn't respond. She just stood there, shaking. I walked around my desk, closed the space between us, and quietly locked my office door. Privacy. Whatever was coming next needed complete privacy. "Take off the sunglasses," I said. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to, but fear had taken over. Real fear. Because deep down, somewhere in my gut, I already knew. She shook her head, tears spilling down her face. That's when I saw them. Bruises along her neck, finger-shaped, 4 on one side, 1 on the other. Someone had wrapped their hands around my sister's throat and squeezed. I reached up and removed the sunglasses myself. And what I saw, God, what I saw will stay with me forever. Her left eye was swollen and completely shut. The skin around it dark purple, almost black. Her lip was split, still stained with dried blood. A deep cut ran along her cheekbone, one that should have been stitched but wasn't. And her eye, the one she could still open, it was empty, lifeless, as if someone had reached inside her and taken everything that made her, her, leaving only a shell behind. "Who did this?" I asked. But I already knew. There's only one person who gets that close. Only one person with that kind of access. Only one person who can hurt you where no one else can see. "Kenya, please," she whispered, her voice cracked and hoarse. "Please don't call the police. Please. He'll kill me. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd kill me." "Roll up your sleeves." I wasn't asking. I was ordering. I used my courtroom voice, the one that makes witnesses fold and defendants break. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. But I had to see it. I needed the full picture. So I reached forward and gently pushed up her sleeves myself. And oh God, what was revealed felt like a map of suffering etched into her skin. Bruises everywhere. Older ones, yellowed and fading, layered beneath newer ones in deep shades of purple and blue. Linear marks across her forearms where she had tried to shield herself. Small circular burn marks scattered across her skin like a cruel pattern no one should ever have to carry. Defensive injuries on her hands, proof of desperate attempts to block incoming blows. And then I saw her wrists, raw, discolored marks where restraints had once been. He had tied her up. Something inside me didn't just break. It shattered completely. No, it detonated. A rage so intense and focused it burned straight through every professional boundary I had ever built, every ethical line I had sworn to uphold. This wasn't a client. This wasn't a case file. This was my sister, my twin, the other half of my soul. "How long?" I asked, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. 3 years, she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. It started about 3 years. 3 years of this nightmare. And I hadn't known. I hadn't seen it. I hadn't been there when she needed me most. Tell me everything, I said. From the beginning. Every detail. I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. And she did. God. The things she told me. She said it didn't start violently. It started subtly. Control disguised as concern. Marcus wanted to know where she was at all times, who she spoke to, what she was doing. He framed it as love, said he worried constantly, said he couldn't stand the thought of anything bad happening to her. Then he began criticizing her appearance. Her clothes were too tight, too noticeable. He said they made her look like she wanted attention from other men, so she changed how she dressed, became more conservative, quieter. Then it was her friends. He didn't approve of them, said they were negative influences, said they were trying to sabotage their marriage. So she stopped seeing them. And then, it was me. He told her that I made her feel inadequate, that my career, my achievements, somehow made Keisha feel small. That was never true. Not for a second. But after months of emotional exhaustion, she either believed him or simply didn't have the strength left to argue anymore. So the phone calls stopped. The visits faded away. He isolated her completely. And I let it happen, because I was too absorbed in my own life to notice what was really going on. The first time he hurt her was on a Thursday night. She remembered the day clearly, because it was trash collection day, and she had forgotten to put the bins out. Something so minor, so meaningless. Marcus came home intoxicated. His drinking had been escalating, and when he saw the bins still by the garage, something inside him snapped. He grabbed her by the hair, dragged her outside, and slammed her face into the garbage bin. He told her that if she was going to act like trash, then she belonged with it. She said she was in complete shock. She couldn't process that it had actually happened. The next morning he apologized. He brought flowers. He cried. He promised it would never happen again. And in her words, not mine, she believed him. But it did happen again, and again, and again. Every time he lost money gambling, and he gambled constantly, draining entire paychecks on sports betting, he came home and took it out on her. Every bad day at work became her punishment. Every complaint from his mother turned Keisha into his emotional outlet. And speaking of his mother, God help me, that woman, Diane Johnson. She moved in with them about a year into the marriage, and that's when everything escalated dramatically. Because Diane didn't just excuse her son's behavior, she actively participated in it. Keisha told me about the constant psychological pressure, the way Diane criticized everything she did. Her food was either too salty or too bland. The house was never clean enough. Nothing Keisha did was ever right. She said Diane criticized her parenting, claiming she was too gentle, too soft. Her clothes were apparently too nice for someone Diane insisted contributed nothing to the household. Never mind the fact that Keisha worked full-time as a teacher while raising a toddler. Diane treated her like a burden, like someone living off scraps instead of holding everything together. And then there was Tamika, Marcus's sister. After her divorce, she moved back home, which really meant she moved into Marcus and Kesha's house, rent-free, responsibility-free, adding another layer to the abuse. Tamika treated Keisha like hired help. She demanded meals, cleaning, laundry. And if Kesha ever pushed back, ever dared to say no, Tamika would run straight to Marcus in tears. And Marcus would punish Keisha for disrespecting his family. So it wasn't just one abuser, it was 3 of them. A coordinated system of cruelty, working together to wear my sister down, piece by piece. But the moment that truly made something snap inside me, the moment that turned my blood ice cold, was when she started talking about Aaliyah, my niece, 5 years old, bright-eyed. My niece, 5 years old, bright-eyed, sweet, innocent. And she had been watching all of this, seeing her father hurt her mother, learning silently that this was normal, that this was love. He hit her, Kesha said, and her voice broke completely. Last night, Aaliyah was crying because she was scared. Marcus told her to be quiet, and when she couldn't stop crying, he slapped her. Kenya, she's 5 years old. I tried to stop him, she continued. I tried to protect her. And he grabbed me by the throat and choked me until I couldn't breathe. He slammed my head into the kitchen counter again and again. She swallowed hard. Diane and Tamika just stood there watching. And then they joined in. Tamika scratched me with a comb. Diane shoved dirty dish rags into my mouth to silence me. She couldn't breathe. She said her vision went red. Her hands started shaking, and she had to sit down before she collapsed. I can't do this anymore, Kenya, she whispered. I can't. I've tried to leave before, but he always finds me. He always brings me back. He said if I ever try to take Aaliyah away from him, he'll kill me. And I believe him. I know he will. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. I came here because I don't know where else to go. I looked at my sister, my identical twin, my other half, and I saw exactly what 3 years of systematic abuse had done. It had taken a vibrant, loving, joyful woman and reduced her to a shadow, a shell, someone who looked like she was simply waiting for the end. And that's when I said the words that changed everything. You won't have to live like this anymore, I told her. Give me 3 days, just 3 days of your life, and I promise you, he will never touch you again. She stared at me like I had lost my mind. What are you talking about? We're going to switch places, I said calmly, even as my mind was already racing, already assembling the plan. You and I are identical. No one can tell us apart. You're going to stay here. I took a breath. I'm going to walk into that house as Keisha, and I'm going to make Marcus Johnson regret every single thing he's ever done to you. Kenya, no, she said, shaking her head. You don't understand. He's dangerous, she said. He'll hurt you, I smiled. And it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile I gave opposing counsel right before I dismantled their entire case. Let him try. You have to understand something. I'm not Keisha. I may look like her. I may sound like her. But at my core, we are very different people. Keisha is gentle, compassionate, soft-hearted. She became a teacher because she wants to protect children, nurture them, and help them grow. She has never thrown a punch in her life. Me? I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've spent 10 years inside courtrooms, staring down prosecutors, judges, and hostile witnesses. I've defended people accused of the worst crimes imaginable, not because I excuse what they did, but because the system demands representation. That job hardens you. It teaches you control, strategy, restraint. And outside the courtroom, I box. 3 times a week. Gloves on, bag work, sparring, conditioning. I know how to take a hit. And more importantly, I know how to deliver one. So when I walked into that house on Wednesday evening, when I used Kesha's keys to unlock the door and stepped into that suburban cage, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The house looked harmless from the outside. Quiet street, trim lawn, 2-car garage. But inside it felt like a mausoleum. Dark, suffocating. The air itself felt heavy, saturated with fear and suppressed violence. I had barely shut the door when I heard her voice. Diane, sharp, demanding, cutting through the house like a blade. Keisha? Is that you? Where have you been all day? You know Marcus gets home at 6 and dinner hasn't even started. I took a slow breath and became my sister. I made myself smaller, rounded my shoulders, lowered my eyes. I walked into the kitchen where Diane sat at the table. a stack of magazines in front of her, a glass of wine in her hand. This woman had lived in my sister's home for 2 years, contributed nothing, and still felt entitled to complain. "I'm sorry," I said softly, using Keisha's voice. "I'll start now." "You better," Diane replied, not even bothering to look up. "And make something decent this time. Last night's chicken was dry." I opened the refrigerator, mentally cataloguing everything inside. Evidence. I'm always collecting evidence. I pulled out the ingredients and began cooking. That's when Tamika wandered in. She was exactly as I had imagined. Poorly dyed blonde hair, a permanent look of irritation etched across her face. She dropped onto the couch like she owned the place. "Oh, good. You're finally home," she said. "Bring me a soda and some chips. I'm starving." I brought her a soda, and as I handed it to her, I studied her closely. Every expression, every habit, filing it all away, thinking about consequences. Then Aaliyah came downstairs. My heart cracked all over again. She looked just like Keisha had as a child. Big brown eyes, soft curls, a face that should have been smiling, but she wasn't. She moved carefully, quietly, like she was trying not to exist. "Mommy," she whispered when she saw me. I knelt down and opened my arms. She ran straight into them. I held my niece for the first time in months, feeling her small body shaking against mine. And right then, without saying a word, I made myself a promise. This ends now. No child should live in fear, not in their own home, not ever. At 8 o'clock sharp, I heard the garage door open. Marcus was home. My entire body went tight, every muscle coiling, prepared for impact. I was about to stand face to face with the man who had spent 3 years terrorizing my sister, the man who had wrapped his hands around her throat, the man who had struck a 5-year-old child. The door slammed open. He was already intoxicated. I could smell it from across the room. Bourbon mixed. "Kesha!" he barked. "Where's my dinner?" He was tall, I'll give him that. About 6'2", maybe 200 pounds. Conventionally attractive in that generic way pharmaceutical sales reps often are. Good hair, white smile, tailored suit. The kind of man who charms medical professionals into trusting him. The kind of man who knows exactly how to hide what he really is. But I could see him, the real him, the predator beneath the suit. "It's ready," I said softly, placing his plate on the table. I made steak, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Everything is intentionally underseasoned. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to register. He sat down without a word. No thank you. No acknowledgement of anyone else at the table. He cut into the steak, took one bite, and his expression twisted. "What the hell is this?" He spat the food back onto his plate. "This tastes like cardboard. Can't you do anything right?" Diane jumped in instantly, like she'd been waiting for her cue. "I've been telling you, Marcus, she can't cook. She can't clean. I don't know what you ever saw in her." Tamika laughed from the couch. "Girls can't do anything but make babies." Marcus stood up, and that's when I saw it clearly. The violence simmered just beneath his skin. He moved toward me from the table, his posture predatory, confident. He was used to Keisha shrinking, apologizing, retreating, used to fear. I didn't step back. I didn't lower my eyes. I looked him directly in the face. "I work all day," he growled, his voice low and threatening. "I put food on this table, clothes on your back, a roof over your head. And this is what you give me? Garbage?" He lifted his hand. I had been waiting for this. 3 years of Keisha's stories had trained me well. He always started the same way. An open-handed strike, designed to humiliate before it hurts. His palm came toward my face, and I caught his wrist in mid-air. The look on his face was priceless, pure shock. He was a large man, accustomed to overpowering someone smaller, someone conditioned to submit. I train, I train, I box. And more than that, I was fueled by 3 years of bottled rage. I tightened my grip around his wrist. Not enough to fracture it, but enough to cause pain. Enough to send a message, enough to make him realize that something fundamental had shifted. The woman standing in front of him was no longer who he believed she was. "Not tonight, Marcus," I said softly, my tone calm, but carrying an edge Keisha had never used before. "I've had a long day too." He tried to yank his wrist free. He couldn't, his face flushed red, humiliation and anger blending into something volatile. He used his other hand to pry at my fingers, but I held firm for 3 more seconds, just long enough. Then I released him. Marcus stumbled backward, clutching his wrist, staring at me like reality had cracked. Diane gasped. "Keisha, how dare you put your hands on my son?" Tamika shot upright on the couch. "Girl, you've lost your mind." But Marcus didn't speak. He just stood there, breathing hard, eyes locked on me. And I saw it clearly. The calculation. He was trying to understand what had changed, how to regain control. He was used to dominance, used to winning, and I had just rewritten the rules. "Dinner's getting cold," I said evenly. "You should eat." Then I turned and walked away. I left them standing there, confused, angry, and for the first time in 3 years, uncertain. I went upstairs and put Aaliyah to bed. I read her. The Paper Bag, Princess. A story about a girl who saves herself and doesn't need a prince. It felt fitting. She fell asleep holding my hand. I stayed there for a long while, watching her breathe, thinking about all the nights she'd fallen asleep, listening to her mother being hurt. Never again. Never again. Around 11, I heard footsteps outside the bedroom. 2 sets, Diane and Tamika. I'd expected this. Abusers don't tolerate losing control, and I had challenged the entire. I stepped into the hallway and quietly closed the door behind me so Aaliyah wouldn't wake. They were waiting, arms crossed, expressions sharp. "We need to talk," Diane said. "About what?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "About your attitude," Tamika snapped. "About that little stunt downstairs. You think you can embarrass Marcus like that in his own house?" "The house that's in my name," I said quietly. "Let's not forget that part." Diane's face reddened. "That house was bought with my son's money." "Actually," I replied, allowing just a trace of my attorney's voice to surface. "The down payment came from my parents. The deed is in my name. Legally, this is my house." I paused. "And you and your daughter are guests. Guests who don't pay rent, don't contribute to utilities, and don't help with household expenses." They stared at each other, stunned. Keisha had never spoken like this, never knew these facts, never pushed back. But I wasn't Keisha. "I don't know what's gotten into you," Diane said, stepping closer. "But this attitude ends now." Tamika moved to my other side, boxing me in. "Yeah. Marcus has been too soft on you. Somebody needs to teach you respect." She shoved me. Not hard, just enough to assert dominance. In the past, Kesha would have stumbled, apologized, backed down. I didn't move. I didn't even shift my weight. I just looked at Tamika. "Don't touch me again," I said calmly. "Or what?" She shoved me again, harder this time. I still didn't move. And that's when I saw it. The confusion in her eyes, and behind it, the first flicker of fear. "Let me explain something to both of you," I said. My voice was cold now, steady and controlled. "I've documented every injury, every bruise, every incident of abuse spanning the last 3 years. I have photographs, medical records, and statements from neighbors who heard the screaming. All of that meets the legal threshold for felony domestic violence." Diane opened her mouth to interrupt me, but I didn't give her the chance. You are both You are both accessories to felony assault, I continued. You participated, you encouraged it, and tonight you physically attacked me yourselves. That's a conspiracy. In this state, that carries a sentence of 5 to 10 years. The colour drained from both of their faces. So here's how this is going to work, I said evenly. You're going back to your rooms. You're not going to touch me. You're not going to threaten me. And tomorrow, we are going to have a very serious discussion about the future of this household. I paused. Are we clear? Diane finally found her voice. You can't prove any of that. I smiled. I'm a lawyer, Diane. Proving things is literally what I do for a living. I turned and walked back into Aaliyah's room, gently closing the door behind me, leaving both women frozen in the hallway, stunned into silence. That was confrontation number 1. I had made it clear that the old power structure was gone, that Keisha was no longer someone they could intimidate or control. But I knew it wasn't over, not even close. Marcus would never let that stand. His pride, his ego, his obsession with dominance, all of it had been challenged. Retaliation was inevitable. The only question was when. I got my answer the next morning. I woke up early, made breakfast for Aaliyah, and helped her get ready for school. Diane and Tamika stayed in their rooms, whispering behind closed doors, avoiding me completely. Marcus had passed out on the couch, still drunk and disoriented from the night before. But when I returned from dropping Aaliyah at school, he was waiting, sober, angry, focused. We need to talk, he said flatly. In the bedroom, now. I followed him upstairs, closed the door behind us, and waited. He turned on me instantly, grabbing my arm with the same grip that had left bruises on Kesha for years. His fingers dug into my skin, painful enough to leave marks. I don't know what's gotten into you, he snarled, his face inches from mine. But it ends today, right now. You're my wife. You do what I say. You show me respect. You know your place, he growled. You're hurting me, Marcus, I said evenly. Good, he replied, squeezing harder. Maybe now you'll remember. Maybe next time you'll think twice before humiliating me. I didn't fight him. I didn't resist. I let him hold my arm. I let his fingers dig in deeper. I let fresh bruises form over the old ones he'd already left behind, because every second of this moment was being documented. The hidden camera I'd installed in the bedroom the day before was recording everything. The audio recorder in my pocket was capturing every word. Evidence. Always building evidence. You think you can just change? Marcus snapped, his voice rising. You think you can suddenly grow a spine? You're nothing without me. Nothing. You were nothing when I met you, and you're still nothing now. A nobody teacher, barely making money, raising a kid alone. I gave you everything. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked calmly. His hand came up again, this time clenched into a fist, ready to strike. That's when I moved. I'd been still, compliant, letting him believe he was in control. But now I shifted my weight, redirected his arm, and used his own momentum against him. One clean movement, a quick sweep, and Marcus Johnson, 6'2", 200 pounds, hit the floor hard. I stood over him. Don't ever try that again. Then I walked out, leaving him there, stunned and shaking with fury. That was the moment Marcus realized something critical. He could no longer control me physically, so he did what abusers often do when that power is gone. He called the police. They arrived about an hour later. 2 officers, one seasoned veteran, one young rookie. Marcus put on a convincing performance, claiming I'd attacked him without provocation, saying I'd become unstable, insisting he feared for his safety. I opened the door, holding a folder. Officers, I said calmly, my husband called you because I defended myself when he attempted to hit me. Before you take his statement, I'd like to show you something. I opened the folder. Inside were medical records spanning 3 years, emergency room visits labeled as accidents, photographs of bruises, cuts, and swelling, documentation of fractures, reports of repeated injuries over time. The veteran officer's expression changed as he reviewed the contents. He recognized the pattern immediately. "Ma'am," he said gently, "how long has this been happening?" "3 years," I replied. "He's assaulted me. He's choked me. He's threatened to kill me if I leave. And this morning, when I finally stood up to him, he tried again. I pushed him away. That's when he called you." Then I showed them the video. Marcus grabbing my arm, threatening me, drawing back to strike, all clearly visible. The younger officer looked shaken. The older one looked angry. "Mr. Johnson," the veteran said firmly, "based on what I'm seeing, you're fortunate we're not placing you under arrest right now." He turned to me. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I just want him to understand that someone is watching now. And if he touches me again, there will be consequences." The officer turned back to Marcus, whose face had gone pale. "We're filing a report," he said. "This address is now flagged. If we get another call here and anything happens to your wife, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" Marcus nodded, silent, humiliated, furious. After they left, it became clear. He couldn't use force. He couldn't use the law. He was running out of options. But his family wasn't finished. That evening, Tamika made her move. She called her boyfriend, Dre, big guy, intimidating build. The intention was obvious. He was there to scare me, maybe shove me around, remind me who was in charge. Tamika conveniently left us alone in the living room. Dre approached with the confidence of a man who had never been challenged by a woman. "So," he said, "I hear you've been giving Marcus some problems." "Have I?" I replied, staying calm, tracking his movements, measuring distance. "Yeah. And I don't like women disrespecting good men. Marcus takes care of his family. And you out here." He reached for me. I moved, one step to the side. I caught his arm, used his forward motion, shifted my hip, and applied leverage. A basic throw, one I'd practiced countless times. Dre went airborne. All 250 pounds of him crashed through the coffee table, wood splintering, glass shattering as he hit the floor in a stunned heap. And just like that, the room went silent. He stared up at me from the floor, shock and pain written clearly across his face. "That's assault," I said calmly, "and it just happened in front of cameras. Multiple cameras, actually. They're hidden throughout this house, recording everything. So if you feel like trying again, be my guest. I'll have you arrested for assault and unlawful entry. That's 5 to 7 years." Dre didn't argue. He scrambled to his feet and bolted out of the house like it was on fire. Tamika screamed at me, called me unstable, called me a monster. I simply smiled and told her she might want to start looking for a new place to live. Marcus and Diane had witnessed everything, and I saw it in their eyes. Fear. This wasn't Kesha anymore. This was someone else. Someone they didn't recognize. Someone they couldn't control. That night, I overheard them plotting. The hidden cameras and audio recorders I'd placed throughout the house captured every word. They were gathered in Diane's bedroom, whispering like co-conspirators. "We can't let this continue," Diane said. "She's destroying our family." "What do we do?" Marcus asked. "We can't touch her. We can't call the police. We can't scare her." "We get rid of her," Tamika said quietly. A long pause followed. "Not like that," Diane said quickly. "But we remove her from the situation, make her disappear." "How?" Marcus asked. "Sleeping pills," Diane replied. "We crush them up, put them in her coffee tomorrow morning. Once she's unconscious, we call mental health services. Say she's had a breakdown, that she's become violent and unstable. They'll take her in for evaluation. And while she's gone, Diane continued, Marcus, you file for divorce and sole custody of Aaliyah. My blood ran cold listening to this. Not because I was scared, but because they were planning to drug me, to have me institutionalized, to steal my niece away from her mother. They had no limits, no conscience, no boundaries. Fine. Neither did I. The next morning, I watched Diane make my coffee. I watched her crush 3 sleeping pills and stir them carefully into the cup. I watched her put on a fake smile as she handed it to me. Here, sweetheart, she said softly. You look exhausted. This will help. I took the cup, raised it to my lips, pretended to sip. Then, when no one was watching, I poured it into a nearby plant. I sat on the couch and acted drowsy, let my head nod forward. I closed my eyes, slowed my breathing. It's working, Tamika whispered. Call the ambulance, Marcus said. Wait, Diane replied. Make sure she's really out. I stayed perfectly still, breathing slow, deep, controlled. Let them believe they'd won. Diane approached and shook my shoulder. Kesha, can you hear me? I didn't respond. She's out, Diane said triumphantly. Call them. That's when I opened my eyes. I sat up. All 3 of them jumped back like they'd seen a ghost. I didn't drink it, I said calmly. I watched you crush the pills, Diane. I watched you stir them in. And I recorded all of it, their faces drained of color. Attempted poisoning, I continued. That's a Class B felony, minimum 20 years. Diane's expression shifted from smug to terrified in seconds. And I also recorded your conversation last night, I added. Conspiracy to unlawfully institutionalize someone, filing false reports with mental health services, fraud, coordinated abuse. I paused. Would you like me to keep going? Because I can. I'm a lawyer. I know exactly which crimes you've committed. They stood frozen, trapped by their own actions, realizing the walls were closing in. Here's what's going to happen now, I said, standing up and walking toward my bag. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Every second sounded louder than the last. Marcus stared at the papers like they were a death sentence. His shoulders were slumped now, the bravado gone, the predator stripped down to what he really was, small, scared, powerless. Diane collapsed into a chair, shaking, whispering prayers under her breath. Tamika paced, hands in her hair, eyes darting like a trapped animal searching for an exit that didn't exist. You're bluffing, Tamika said weakly. You wouldn't actually. I would, I cut in. Calm, certain. And I will. I don't bluff with lives, especially children's. I slid the pen across the table toward Marcus. 5 o'clock, I repeated. Those are your choices. Marcus picked up the pen. His hand trembled so badly he could barely hold it. If I sign this, he said hoarsely, you promise you won't go to the DA? If you follow every condition to the letter, I said. Yes. 1 violation, 1 text, 1 drive-by, 1 attempt to contact Keisha or Aaliyah, and everything goes straight to the prosecutor. No warnings, no second chances. He swallowed hard. And the cameras? Diane asked through tears. They stay, I said, until you're gone. Marcus looked at his mother, at his sister. Neither of them had anything left to say. They had spent 3 years empowering a monster, and now they were paying the bill. He signed. Each stroke of the pen looked painful, like it cost him something physical. When he finished, I flipped the papers toward me, checked every line, every signature. Good, I said. Now stand up. They obeyed immediately. You have 24 hours, I continued. Take only your personal belongings. Nothing from this house belongs to you anymore. Not the furniture, Not the electronics, not the keepsakes. If anything goes missing, I call the police. Tamika opened her mouth. Not a word, I said, and she shut it. I gathered the folder, slid everything back inside, and snapped it closed. This copies are already stored securely with a third party. So don't even think about destroying anything. Marcus nodded numbly. Now, I said, stepping aside. Pack a bag. You're sleeping somewhere else tonight. They moved like ghosts, defeated, silent. An hour later, the house was quiet. I walked into Keisha's bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, eyes tired but alert. It's done, I said softly. She looked up at me. Really? For now, I replied. They're gone tomorrow. Restraining orders are already drafted. Divorce papers signed. Custody secured. Her shoulders sagged, the weight finally lifting. She didn't cry at first. She just breathed. Deep. Free. Then she broke. I crossed the room and held her as she sobbed. 3 years of fear, pain, humiliation, and survival pouring out all at once. You're safe now, I whispered. And Aaliyah is safe. They can never hurt you again. The next morning, Marcus, Diane, and Tamika left the house with their bags and their heads down. By sunset, the locks were changed. The restraining orders were filed. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. That night, I tucked Aaliyah into bed. Is the bad man gone? She asked softly. Yes, I said, brushing her hair back. He's gone for good. She smiled, turned over, and fell asleep without flinching at every sound. Keisha stood in the doorway, watching. You didn't just save me, she said quietly. You gave me my life back. I met her eyes. No, I said. You survived long enough for help to arrive. That strength was always yours. And for the first time in 3 years, the house felt like a home. They didn't argue. They didn't threaten. They didn't even look at each other. They just nodded. That was how completely the Marcus sank into his chair like his bones had turned to sand. Diane stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight, rage and grief battling behind her eyes. Tamika was already halfway detached, mentally gone, survival mode engaged. Keisha took a slow breath beside me. She looked taller somehow, lighter, like someone who had finally stepped out from underwater. As we turned to leave, Marcus spoke again, his voice raw. You think this makes you strong? Keisha stopped, turned, looked at him, not with fear, not with anger, but with something far worse for him. Indifference. No, she said quietly. Leaving you does. We walked out together. The next day, a sheriff's deputy stood in the living room while boxes were carried out in silence. No shouting, no dramatics. Just the sound of tape ripping and footsteps echoing through a house that had lost its tyrants. By 4:42 p.m., they were gone. At 5 o'clock on the dot, I changed the locks. The house exhaled. Kesha sat on the couch with Aaliyah curled against her side, a blanket wrapped around them both. The little girl was laughing at a cartoon, carefree in a way she never had been before. Is it really over? Kesha asked softly. For them, I said. Yes. And for me? I met her eyes. Now it begins. In the weeks that followed, everything moved quickly. The divorce was finalized without contest. Full custody was granted to Kesha. The restraining orders were approved. Marcus, Diane, and Tamika barred from coming within 500 feet. Child support payments were set up automatically, enforced by the court. Miss one, and the system would move without mercy. Marcus never missed one. He'd learned. Keisha started therapy. Aaliyah did too. Play therapy, gentle and patient. Slowly the nightmares stopped. The flinching faded. Laughter returned. And Keisha changed. She cut her hair. She repainted the bedroom. She took long walks. Just one evening, months later, we sat on the porch watching the sun go down. I used to think strength meant enduring, she said. Staying, surviving. And now? I asked. Now I know strength is choosing myself, she said. And my daughter. Even when I'm scared. I smiled. That's the lesson abusers never understand. What? That the moment their victim stops believing the lies about worth, about fear, about dependence, it's already over. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I don't know how to thank you. I shook my head. You already did. How? You lived long enough to be saved. Aaliyah ran out onto the porch then, holding a drawing. It was a picture of 3 stick figures, a woman, a little girl, and another woman standing beside them, all holding hands. Above them, in crooked crayon letters, were the words, "We are safe." That was the real ending. Not revenge, not fear, not power. Freedom. Marcus stood up. He was a large man, and for a brief second, I genuinely thought he might attempt one last desperate move, one final display of violence. Part of me was prepared for it. A small part of me even expected it. But he didn't. He just stood there, hollow, defeated, like all the strength had drained out of him at once. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice thin, almost unrecognizable. What kind of person does something like this? I didn't hesitate. The kind who loves her sister, I said evenly. The kind who protects her family. The kind who refuses to let monsters win. I reached for Kesha's hand. "Come on," I said softly. "Let's go home." And we did. We walked out of that house together, leaving Marcus and his family behind, leaving 3 years of fear, control, and suffering locked inside those walls. Every step forward felt lighter, like gravity itself had finally loosened its grip. We weren't just leaving a house, we were walking toward freedom, accompanied by a sheriff's deputy. The house was empty. They were gone. All of them. Boxes cleared out, rooms stripped bare. They had vanished, likely retreating to Diane's sister's place across town. Fine by me. Distance was a gift. I immediately changed every lock, installed a real security system, mounted visible cameras this time, not hidden ones. I wanted it obvious. I wanted anyone who came near that house to know they were being watched. Kesha and Aaliyah were finally safe. Over the following weeks, I watched something incredible happen. My sister came back to life. Not gradually, not cautiously, but unmistakably. She smiled again. Real smiles, not the tight, practiced ones she'd worn for years. She laughed freely. She played with Aaliyah without constantly scanning the room. She returned to teaching and found joy in it again. The kind of joy that reminded me why she'd chosen that profession in the first place. Aaliyah changed too. The fear drained from her eyes. She stopped flinching at sudden sounds. She made friends at school. She filled pages with drawings, pictures of herself and her mum, always side by side, always smiling. That's when I knew we'd truly won. Marcus, of course, tried to challenge the custody arrangement. Men like him always do. But this time, he wasn't dealing with fear or silence. He was dealing with me. I represented Keisha in family court and submitted everything. Every record, every photograph, every video, every documented injury. The judge reviewed the file, watched the footage of Marcus putting his hands on Kesha, and made a decision immediately. His parental rights were terminated on the spot. No visitation, no contact, no exceptions. The child support payments began shortly after. Marcus had to sell his car. He cashed out his retirement account. He took out loans just to keep up. Good. Let him feel what it's like to lose control. Let him experience consequences. Diane eventually filed for bankruptcy after being forced to liquidate her hidden savings. Tamika moved back in with her ex-husband, which I imagine came with its own Tamika moved back in with her ex-husband, which I imagine came with its own complications. The three of them scattered, fractured, no longer a united front of intimidation and abuse. They were done. Keisha wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. 6 months later, she met someone new, a genuinely good man, a teacher like her, calm, kind, respectful, someone who treated her with patience and care. I vetted him thoroughly, of course. Background checks, records, the works. He was clean, he was safe. They took things slowly. No pressure, no rush. Keisha didn't need a relationship to feel whole anymore. She already was. And if she never chose marriage again, that was perfectly fine. What mattered was watching her believe in trust again, watching her allow hope back into her life. That was the real victory, not the paperwork, not the restraining orders, not Marcus's collapse. The real victory was seeing my sister remember who she was before someone tried to erase her. People ask me if I regret it. They ask if I regret crossing ethical boundaries, if I regret impersonating my sister, if I regret manipulating the situation, gathering evidence the way I did, becoming what some would call a vigilante. My answer is simple. No, not for a single second. Because here's what most people don't understand about domestic violence. The system isn't designed to protect victims. It's designed to protect abusers. Victims are expected to document everything, photograph everything, report everything, relive everything. And even then, even with overwhelming evidence, abusers walk free far too often. On average, a woman attempts to leave 7 times before she succeeds. 7. And a significant number of women who do leave are harmed or killed within the first 2 years of separation. The system failed my sister for 3 years. So I became the system. I became her protection. I became her shield. I became her justice. Was it legal? Mostly, yes. I was meticulous. The impersonation existed in a grey area, but I was meticulous. The impersonation existed in a grey area, but it wasn't illegal. Kesha gave consent. The recordings were lawful. The evidence was admissible. Was it right? Without question. Because at the end of the day, what matters more? Strictly following every technical rule, or saving a woman's life and protecting a child from growing up surrounded by fear? I know what some of you are thinking. You're probably thinking, she went too far. That I should have just called the police, filed a report, trusted the process, and stayed inside the so-called proper channels. So let me tell you what actually happens when you do everything the right way. The police arrive. They make a statement. Sometimes they arrest the abuser. Sometimes they don't. And if they do, he's often released on bail within hours. He comes back home, angry, humiliated, and looking for someone to blame. And almost every time, the person who pays for that 911 call is the victim. Restraining orders? They're just paper. They don't stop punches. They don't stop threats. They don't stop someone who has already decided to hurt you. And family court? Let's be honest, it's broken. Abusers lie. They manipulate. They charm judges, social workers, and evaluators. They paint their victims as unstable, vindictive, dramatic, or mentally unwell. And far too often, it works. They get shared custody. They get visitation. They get continued access to the very people they terrorized behind closed doors. So no, I don't regret stepping outside the system. I don't regret taking control when the system refused to protect my sister. Because if I hadn't, Kesha would still be in that house, still walking on eggshells, still being hurt, still living in fear. And Aaliyah would be growing up believing that violence is love, that silence is survival, that fear is normal. I broke that cycle. In 3 days, I shattered a pattern that could have repeated for generations. Here's the moment that made everything worth it. Last week, we were at the park. Just the three of us, me, Keisha, and Aaliyah. Sitting on a bench, eating ice cream, watching kids run around without a care in the world. Aaliyah looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Aunt Kenya, thank you for saving my mummy." I asked her what she meant, and she said, "I used to be scared all the time. Scared of Daddy, scared of Grandma, scared to make noise, scared to be happy." Then she smiled. "But I'm not scared anymore. Mummy's not sad anymore. And it's because of you. That's why I did it. For moments like that. For a 5-year-old who finally gets to be a child without fear. And now, I want to speak directly to anyone watching this who might be living something similar. Maybe someone you love is hurting you. Maybe you're trapped in a relationship that's slowly breaking you down. Maybe you've tried to leave before and been pulled back in. Maybe you're watching this quietly with your abuser in the next room, hoping they don't hear what you're listening to. So listen to me carefully. You deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve a life without fear. I know it feels impossible. I know you've been told you can't survive without them, that no one else would want you, that you're weak, that you're imagining things, that it's your fault. I know they've isolated you from friends and family, controlled your money, monitored your phone, watched your every move. I know they've threatened you if you leave, threatened your children, threatened the people you love. I know all of this because abusers don't improvise. They follow a script: isolate, control, hurt, threaten, repeat. But here's the truth they never want you to hear. You can get out. You can survive. You can build a new life. It won't be easy. It may be the hardest thing you ever do. You'll need help. From family, from friends, from domestic violence organizations, from legal aid and advocates who understand this system. You'll need to plan carefully, document everything, be patient, be strategic. But it is possible. And if you don't have a sister like me who can step in and fight for you, that's okay. You can be your own hero. Start small. Document everything, every bruise, every broken object, every threatening text. Email it to a trusted friend or store it somewhere safe in the cloud where he can't access it. Build your evidence. Reach out to domestic violence organizations. They have resources, shelter beds, legal advocates, safety planning experts. They can help you create an escape plan that minimizes risk. Talk to a lawyer. Many offer free consultations for domestic violence cases. Learn your rights. Learn what evidence is needed for restraining orders, custody, or divorce. Save money if you can, even small amounts. Hide it. Build an escape fund. And when your plan is ready, when your support system is in place, leave. And don't look back. I won't lie to you. The statistics are scary. The most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is right after leaving. That's when abusers escalate. That's when violence spikes. But staying is far more dangerous. Staying is a death sentence, just a slower one. My sister stayed for 3 years. 3 years of escalating violence. If she'd stayed any longer, Marcus would have killed her. I know it. She knows it. The only question was when, not if. So she left. Yes, it was dangerous. Yes, he tried to retaliate. But she survived. She's thriving now. And you can too. For those watching who aren't in an abusive relationship, listen carefully. Pay attention. Watch for the signs. Your sister, your daughter, your friends and your co-worker, they might be suffering in silence. They might wear long sleeves in summer, cancel plans last minute, lose weight, seem anxious or depressed, or make excuses for their partner's behavior. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. Don't tell yourself it's none of your business. Don't assume they'll ask for help if they need it. Ask them directly in a private moment. Are you safe? Is he hurting you? Give them space to tell the truth. Believe them. Don't judge them for staying. Don't tell them what to do. Offer support and offer resources. And if you can, help more directly. If you have legal expertise, financial resources, or even physical strength, use it. Use your privilege to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The system is broken. It fails victims every single day. We must be the safety net. We must catch people when they fall. We must step outside comfort zones, take risks, and fight battles that aren't technically ours. Domestic violence isn't a private problem. It's everyone's problem. And it will take all of us working together to fix it. I used to think the law was enough, that enforcing existing laws, prosecuting more cases, handing out longer sentences would end domestic violence. I learned the law is only a tool, and like any tool, it only works if someone wields it. Victims often can't use it themselves. They're too scared, too controlled, too broken. Sometimes someone else has to pick up that tool and wield it for them. That's what I did for my sister. And I'd do it again. I'd do it for anyone who needs it. 3 days. That's all it took to dismantle 3 years of abuse. 3 days of strategic planning, careful documentation, calculated confrontations. 3 days of being someone I wasn't, or maybe someone I'd always been, but had never needed to be before. Marcus Johnson is broken now. His life is ruined. His reputation was destroyed. His family scattered. His money is gone. Every month when he writes that child support check, he's reminded of what he lost. Not because I took it, but because he threw it away. He had a good woman, a beautiful daughter, a comfortable life, and he destroyed all of it with fists, rage, and the need for control. I feel no pity. He made his choices. Now he lives with the consequences. Diane learned enabling abuse makes you just as guilty as the abuser. She lost her son, her granddaughter, her home, her savings, alone, with no one to blame but herself. Tamika learned bullying has consequences. She lost her free ride, her support system, her family. She's back with her ex-husband, probably continuing the cycle of dysfunction. Keisha learned she's stronger than she thought, that she deserves love, respect, and safety. She doesn't have to accept abuse just because someone calls it love. Aaliyah learned women don't have to be victims, that standing up to bullies is possible, that her mother is a survivor, her aunt a fighter, and they come from a line of strong women who don't back down. And me? I learned sometimes being good means breaking rules, that justice and legality aren't always the same thing, that the most important battles are the ones fought for the people we love. I'm Kenya Matthews. I'm 32. I'm a criminal defense attorney who spent 3 days impersonating my twin sister to save her from her abusive husband, and I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. If this story moved you, made you angry, sad, hopeful, or determined, hit like. Let me know if this message reached you. Subscribe for more real stories of survival and courage. Comment below, tell me where you're watching from, if you've survived something like this, or if you know someone who needs to hear this story. Let's build a community of survivors, supporters, and people who refuse to stay silent. Silence is what abusers count on. Silence is what allows them to continue. Silence is what kills. So speak up. Make noise. Talk about domestic violence. Talk about the failures of the system. Talk about unconventional solutions. Talk about the power of love to overcome evil. My sister is free. She's safe. She's happy. She's healing. And that was worth every rule bent, every line crossed, every risk taken. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of the solution. Stay safe. If you're in danger, reach out. If someone you love is in danger, step up. We're all we've got. This is Kenya Matthews, signing off. Peace.